Welcome to We Built This Brand. I'm your host, as always, Chris Hill, and with me today is my guest host, Adhrucia.
Hi, guys. I'm the host of Conversations with Curiosity. I'm so excited to be here at Power Forward, and we have some beautiful guests for you.
We absolutely do. We've got Katie Soo, and we've got of course, this would happen, Ty Randolph. Like my iPad always locks, and I'm like, I just need to glance down and see it, and then, Lordy.
Ready?
Okay.
I'll start. Okay.
We'll go there.
Chris, we got some amazing guests with us today.
Yes, we do. We got Katie Soo, and then we've got Ty Randolph with us as well. We're really excited to talk to y'all.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, we're excited to be here.
So Chris's podcast is all about brand building and building and how we build brands. And both of you have worked for exponential amounts of amazingly big brands before starting your own.
Absolutely.
So please tell me a little bit about your background for our audience. I know, but they would like to know.
Oh, wow. I started my career out with advertising and brand building. So sort of classic Mad Men agencies, Publicis, WPP, but I was always in the digital and emerging media team. So really redefining how brands connect and convert digitally. And that kind of naturally led me into tech. Sony Music internally, inside their digital business group, where we architected a platform that was kind of like a managed service Shopify before its time, that hosted over 200 individually branded artist stores. Wow. And so not only were we building this platform with like a B2B, a B to B to C proposition, but we were responsible for caring for artists, audiences and brands in partnership with the labels. That ended up leading me to Meta. Long story. And I almost went to Lionsgate when I was leaving Sony. So Lionsgate called me back a little while later with an offer to help them architect a really interesting brand. They were doing a joint venture with Kevin Hart called Laugh Out Loud. And I joined that team to take the brand to market and really helped architect it. Grew it exponentially over the course of about 7 years. And then now I'm in the process of launching my own venture, but I'm also advising a company that I'm on the board of, Rock the Bells, a LL Cool J's company, and we just took them through a rebrand. So Lots of brand building.
She might be a brand expert. I'm just saying,
Just
Chris.
a little bit of one.
Wait till you hear Katie's.
Okay, let's go, Katie.
Katie Soo. I think a lot of people probably know me from one of the first brands I helped build and launch called Dollar Shave Club. A lot of people ask me like, oh, you went into selling razors? That was not the dream. That is absolutely not what I decided to do. Men's grooming was not like at the top of the list, but it was such an incredible brand and story. I was a third person there. We built it from scratch, did everything. I mean, I wore many, many hats. And I like to say the best thing about that job is you got to do everything. You know, you got to do marketing, digital, social, way ahead of its time in social media storytelling. And then from there, I fell into media and entertainment. So early days on the marketing team for Hulu, went around town, signed all the distribution deals with all the networks, redefined streaming in the early days of what it was, And then eventually from there went to support like full screen, auto portfolio, worked on many properties that are still here today in terms of streaming, was recruited by Warner Brothers, went to go help do marketing and branding for their entire direct-to-consumer portfolio. And then worked on DC, took them digital as well. And then from DC, I was pulled in to do one more build in entertainment. And they were like, it's going to be a short video build. And I took over the HBO Now business.
Wow.
And then eventually launched HBO Max. That is now still called HBO Max. And so, from there, I needed a little bit of a palate cleanser, went to kids and family for a bit. And then from there, I just advised companies, advised CEOs, invested. And I still do that today. And a lot of my heart is in supporting women entrepreneurs and founders.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great place to be. And I mean, Dollar Shave Club, I mean, of course I've heard of them. I mean, that's...
I hope you weren't a part of the group that we accidentally neglected in the shipping. I'm
thankfully, no. I've as much as I'm familiar with them, I am very loyal to Gillette. So I know. Sorry.
I can't be here.
I know.
Can't be here.
I need
Interview's
to
over.
exit
I need to
this
leave.
podcast.
Yeah. But no, I mean, what they did with the Dollar Shave Club is just fascinating to me, and there's a lot of growth there. And then obviously with, with Ty, with your brand and everything that you've helped, like I mean, working with LL Cool J and Kevin Hart, I mean, those are fascinating roles. So, what do you learn from your time in building these brands and building these things from concepts through execution and even through the point of closing a deal and selling the business and growing it into something bigger?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the fundamental things that has changed over the arc of my career. So, starting on the advertising agency side and really thinking about how brands were built, sort of like one to many, and how, sort of eyeballs were centralized and broadcast and, sort of like mass media. We've seen this fundamental shift, the rise of the creator economy, this decentralization of influence, and the rise of community. And when we look at the new entrants, who would have thought that when it comes to innovation, companies like Elf would be looking at Hailey Bieber, LVMH would be, sort of harkening back to a Rihanna or a Pharrell. And I think it speaks to, with the rise of social media, the proliferation of digital, and really the empowerment of the consumer creator, right, who has a voice themselves. Brand building has really been democratized. And so I think we've been really fortunate to have a front row seat for all of that and really be on the leading edge of so much of it. But you've also seen a lot of brands suffer during that time in capturing share of wallet and, sort of share of heart and share of mind by not tapping into that. And so much about what I'm building next. So what I've been building over the last few years have been creator-centric brands. And, in the next move, it's how do we take sort of mass brand building, the rise of the creator economy, and the rise of the new majority that we're just about to talk about, and these new influential communities that have so much more say, over what happens at the point of sale. Sort of, what do the new brand building pyramids look like now?
I completely agree on the community side. I think a lot has shifted on the brand and consumer relationship. Because Ty covered it, I'll talk about it maybe from the business side. Okay. On the business side, I think traditionally, maybe a decade plus ago, you would have brands really focus on the brand storytelling and the narrative, like how it makes a consumer feel. And I think that worked in a different era, right? Now you're really seeing this shift in brand tied to revenue, tied to effectiveness, tied to efficiency. And it almost swung too far on that side, right? Because you're starting to see a lot of the heart of the story and the heart of the brand start to fail. And as that begins to fail, you start seeing this rise of the creator economy again. So I think somewhere in the middle is where creators and brands can thrive, because that is what we as consumers are seeking, right? When you see a very polished Super Bowl commercial, it doesn't have the same impact as it did maybe like 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. But what you do see is maybe if you scroll through and you have a TikTok video of a creator that you trust, who looks like you, who lives your life, knows the story that you grew up from, and they're telling you about a product that they used, suddenly you feel more inclined to buy that, right? So I think that there's just a shift on the definition of branding and the polished nature of it and how people convert based on that. And so as long as you pay attention to brand narrative, to your operating model, to your business model, to your revenue, and you think about those margins throughout, then your consumer relationship also benefits from it as well.
So we're seeing this democratization of brands, as you called it, and that's a beautiful thing. For those who are out there who are considering starting a brand or in the middle of building a brand, what would be your 1 to 3 pieces of advice on how you break through the noise? Because now, with that democratization, we have an influx of brands, and our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. And so what is a key piece of advice that you would give to someone who's looking to start out a brand or who is building a brand right now to really break through that noise?
I think a few things. One, because everyone has access to a microphone or a megaphone, I think there can be a temptation to try to go mass quickly. But I really believe that specificity and authenticity is more important than ever. And so it's really find your tribe and find your niche. There is, I believe the path to sort of like universal resonance is through hyper specificity. And if you look at the brands that are doing the best and that are growing the fastest, they have like landed and expanded. They found a core group, a community, advocators, sort of fanatics almost about not just the brand, but the philosophy and the lifestyle and the ethos. And you let them carry the water for you. So I think that's number one, sort of like be hyper specific. The other piece is really know your audience. I mean, I'm almost overwhelmed by how much data the average consumer has on social media now that we as marketers used to clamor for before. And so if you're connecting across any platform, really look into those insights and look into that real-time feedback loop and take action based on those insights. And then the other piece is, I say this, whether we're talking to brand builders or creators today, you have to be, one part artist, one part scientist, and so I think that marriage of art and science is really important, where there has to be this sort of scientific model approach, like test, learn, iterate really fast, and try something new. And so that lab-like behavior will get you pretty far very fast if you're able to implement that.
That's great advice.
I would say definitely know your audience. Oftentimes when you want to build a brand, you think that just because you want it and that you see the demand for it, that people feel the same way. But knowing your audience also means you have to listen to your audience. So being able to iterate on your product, iterate on your company and your offering pretty quickly is very important. Like speed to market is one thing, but being able to prototype at the pace that the market is moving and the way that your audience demands it, I think that is probably what sets you apart. And also like consistency. I think the part that is very challenging is a lot of companies and a lot of new founders give up when they don't see that hockey stick growth immediately. Most people don't realize that, God, even in the entertainment industry, when you have people announce like breakout star, that star has been grinding for decades, right? But you don't know the projects that person has been in. The same is true for founders and companies. Mm-hmm. Consistency is key. So being out there, listening to your audience, iterating the product, and then in addition to that, consistently providing value, like going on your TikTok live shop or using your e-com buttons and platforms and optimizing your website, leveraging AI as a tool, constantly improving that experience puts you at the front and center. And then I think the other thing is just hire people smarter than you. I mean, it's just not talked about enough. I think a lot of times founders can have a mentality where because you're starting out, you want to do everything because you know the audience, you know the product, you know the demand. But the reality is you get stretched thin very, very fast. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest issues I've heard in a lot of advisory, practices is a founder, when they hit success, that's when things get really hard, right? So when you hit success, you want to be able to 10x that pretty quickly. And if you don't surround yourself with the right type of defensive mode and offensive mode of people smarter than you in certain areas, you're scrambling in that moment to do that. And that's where sometimes the path breaks, where you have founders who become incredibly successful because they've sort of optimized for scale, and founders who still try to do everything themselves and end up doing everything maybe not quite well enough, right? So you have to be prepared when it's opportunity meets preparation. Right. I think that's very key.
I would agree. I mean, I've seen that with the clients we produce podcasts for, the ones that are prepared to go viral, they've been going at it for a while and then they finally see that swell of growth as a result of it. I mean, it definitely is a matter of the hard work that they put in for the 60 or 100 plus episodes they've done prior to that gets them where they are, and not the the massive, going viral overnight campaign type of thing. So yeah, I think you're right there. Absolutely. Well, talking about brands, talking about growth in brands, what are some of the challenges as we look towards, maybe the next year to 5 years? What do you see as the challenges for growing communities in branding?
Yeah, I think some of those same opportunities also present challenges. You were just talking about the innovation clip. It's accelerated so significantly that, before we could put a campaign in the market, you could have an idea about where you wanted your brand to go. And, we planned in, fiscal years and, at least quarters. And now there's this sort of like real-time innovation that really requires a much more active posture and a much more proactive and often reactive posture. And so I just think that the level of agility and sort of entrepreneurial athleticism that's required today is just unprecedented, right? And I also think when we talk about the democratization and the fragmentation of brand building, sure, that's a plus. There's an opportunity for lots more entrants, but then getting to scale becomes a lot more challenging because there are only so many eyeballs and there's so many times in the day. And, there's only, sort of like so much disposable income. And so and we live in an attention economy where you're competing with everything and everywhere all the time. And so all at once. And so I think that, and again, it goes kind of back to that athleticism. So sure, it's easier to get to a consumer. It's easier to get a product to market. You can launch a podcast. You can, it's easier to make content now, but to get those things to scale, the same tools that make it easier for everyone else. And so differentiating and growing and maintaining and sustaining attention do become more challenging in this environment.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely more of a slog to get content out, even. Like you think, okay, well, we're just going to post to all the platforms. And even that takes up time just to get your marketing out there.
I would say the two things that are the greatest challenges I see is saturation and globalization. And I think saturation is exactly what Ty was mentioning, right? If you just look at the domestic market, share of wallet is a very specific size, right? The disposable income of a target audience that you're going after is quite set, right? So you have a ceiling and a saturation point. So if you're launching a business and a company and you're not thinking global, then you're already missing what your success means on the other side. And as somebody who advises on transactions, right? If you miss that part of it, you're really capping yourself and your ability to grow, right? So you're kind of going out the gate with this great idea, this great product, this great company with a top of the market ceiling. Yeah. So what does that mean, right? That's not enough. So saturation is definitely a point to consider. Globalization is just because with technology, with AI, with everything happening, I mean, you definitely see it now, right? The geopolitical landscape has a macro effect on how we produce products. In addition to that, that's the same for digital products too, right? You are in a constant battle of what territory, what area to launch in, what market is the next place to go, so that you have the opportunity for scale and new audiences, but you're also not in conflict with anything that could hurt your business. I mean, not to get into, anything that was historic, but Ty and I were just talking about COVID era and catching up. But COVID era was a perfect equalizer for that because the global supply chain was decimated overnight. So many companies who typically had successful businesses didn't really have a backup plan, right? Now that you've progressed a couple years after that, many people have thought through global supply chain, but now you're talking about an accelerated pace of technology. So what are we doing? What are founders doing to combat that, prepare for that, and also think about scale in light of all of that, I think is a really great challenge that isn't often discussed enough.
We're at Power Forward today, and so a lot of the focus is on that intersection of tech with all these different businesses that we're here talking about. If you were going to point to a founder you were advising and say, because a lot of times every time tech booms, I think for founders, there's a bit of a scramble effect where it's so much is happening, and where do I pay attention? And so what is either a place that you can point to or a piece of advice to kind of break through that noise when you look at the emergence of tech and how it affects each of these brands? Where would you tell founders to kind of focus to make sure that they're staying ahead or with the curve, and at the same time not drowning in the noise that sometimes happens when these tech explosions happen?
I feel very strongly about this one. I mean, I will say you have to relentlessly focus on the thing you're selling, right? Because
Great
bear
advice.
markets make incredible companies. So the polarizing view is a lot of people get very scared in these types of markets, right? Capital is restrained, cost of capital is high, and not every company is going to succeed. These are the best markets to build companies, right? If you have an idea and people vote with their money, that idea is going to win. The question is, what is that idea? And so the biggest trap most founders fall into during these markets is if they start to see success on one side, they think, oh, I should go and launch those 3 other companion products. It's like, no, just focus on the one thing, get exceptionally good at it, have that be your core business until it can fund your next thing. Because then you're going into multiples. Then you're really thinking about the value of the company in the long term. But yeah, I think this is like the kingmaker era, right? If you can carve out like X percentage of any industry and any company today, you could technically
You can do anything.
you can do anything, right? Then if you think about historically, some of the best founders and best companies that we use today still were founded in bear markets. So anything is possible, but diversification, probably not the right time to do that. It's more about focus, getting really good at it, and then having a strong enough foundation that when the opportunity presents itself, then you diversify.
And the other, I would just add to that whatever industry you're in, AI is going to disrupt and transform it. And so you should be actively asking yourself, even as you are putting together your pitch deck, as you're out to your investors and founders, as you're reporting to your current board, wherever you are in your cycle, you should be actively not just planning for that disruption, but preempting and leaning into it, right? So thinking about how you can leverage and that idea prepare, because before it used to be, will we be disrupted and at what level? And so when the innovation clip accelerates, the staying power of brands essentially decreases. So what I mean by that is, you look at how long radio or television was like the dominant form of like entertainment. So these had decades long, sort of like periods of dominance. And now that innovation clip, you're seeing, companies, the life cycle for companies who, unless they are literally steeped in innovation as a business model, right, and constantly disrupting themselves, they become obsolete a lot faster. And so I would prepare for that disruption and prepare to be continually disrupted, and then have an orientation of being perpetually disruptive. And so I would, again, it's more of this sort of like stay on your feet model now. It's no longer sit back in the chair and let's see what's going to happen. Let's sit at the top of the boardroom. Those days are gone.
Those days. What do you mean?
That is crazy. So something that I'm thinking of is we're talking about community and stuff. Do you all ever find the community to be wrong? That's a hard question, I know, but like, have you ever found yourself in a situation where like the community doesn't know what they're talking about here? They're telling us something, and I'm not saying like from an arrogant standpoint that you eventually come around on, but like, how do you defend your brand or your vision when you're trying to be hyper specific and you have to fight the community, so to speak, within that?
I wouldn't say that the community is wrong, but I would say that you can misread a signal, right? And I would say you don't take a signal as a mandate. So you may have a community that's, giving you a specific reaction or feedback loop to a product experience or, to an experience itself or, to a leader in a company. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think you take that into account. If you're sitting around, and the same way you would if you're sitting around, you think about your community as stakeholders. And if you're having an all hands and you're talking to your team, or if you're sitting around a boardroom and you have someone who dissents, you're going to say, like, okay, that's a valuable piece of feedback, I should take it. But it's not necessarily representative of the whole. Or you could have a lot of folks giving you information, but they may not have the context, for instance, of like what your P&L looks like, so that they don't understand why you're making that particular decision. So I think we have to take these signals and this feedback as valuable and valid. My mom would always say, if it's real to you, it's real. So if like you're having that experience, with my brand, with my business, whether you're an employee, whether you're a board member, stakeholder, investor, if you're a follower on social media, it's real. but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the thing that I have to action in isolation, that exact piece of feedback. And I think that a lot of brands then find themselves in hyperreactive states because it's a very scary place to be publicly exposed and having a conversation. But we also see the attention span of audiences. And we know that in many of these cases, there'll be a piece of feedback and it'll be very rich in charge. And then it's sort of like on to the next. And I think the idea is, how do you create a flexible feedback loop so that you can take that in, action it, and constantly improve and be transparent, right? Like, I think if your brand knows that you're listening and that you're taking that feedback, if your audience knows that you're listening, you're taking that feedback into account, they're more likely to give grace.
I'd also say it depends on your conviction and what your long-term plan is, right? I tend to ingest all feedback as data. And if the data gets to a point of critical mass, then you almost, as a person developing a product, whatever your offering may be, you almost have to reevaluate, does this make sense? But I agree with Ty. I mean, like, you can't be in a place where you're constantly iterating based on every tweet, comment, social media, video you see, because if you do, you inevitably dilute the quality of your offering. And I think you start to lose picture of your longer term roadmap,
And
right?
lose some sleep.
And strong brands solicit strong reactions, negative and positive, right? So I think if you're going to prepare to have a brand that's very well loved, that same brand may be also,
Polarizing.
exactly, in some audiences. So I think if you are a brand that is, eliciting emotion from your audience, you should expect there to be reactions, on both sides. Again, take the feedback in, you action it, but I don't think it's, tell me a brand today who isn't getting signals that says there's something serious that you need to change, or I'm having a reaction to that. And so the idea is, are you resonating with your core? Are you unnecessarily polarizing? And I don't think that's just, you ask about feedback in general, I don't think that's just for social media. I think it's in your boardroom. I think it's, the folks who are on your cap table, all of those folks, you have to, digest that feedback.
Well, and one other thing I'll add to that too is any feedback, if that's strong, is positive, right? That means there is enough of your core audience paying attention to what your brand is doing.
Yeah.
And so that in itself is a very positive thing, right? There are a ton of tactics you can deploy, right? You can find focus groups, you can evaluate your product, you can do a bunch of different things to evaluate what that signal is. But generally speaking, if you get a visceral reaction, positive or negative, that means it's hitting something, right? So I would still take it as a positive sign. What you do as a founder, though, sort of sets the tone for how you run a company and how you manage your investors and your board. And so knowing how you pivot in those moments, and if you pivot at all, is also a very important thing.
Understanding those core values and what matters to you as a founder, I think, is important there. And yeah, I mean, that's what I was really curious about, because it is very challenging, especially for smaller businesses and startups, when everybody has an opinion on what you should do with this technology, this idea, this concept, whatever it is. And it just puts you in this position to go, well, I should just be everything to everybody. I mean,
we all know how that goes.
We'll just be the
Doesn't
magic
end
widget,
well.
and that'll fix everything. But yeah, that I think is the inverse of the challenge with all the great community feedback you can get that can help you improve. So yeah, thank you for that. That's awesome. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. Ty and Katie, thank you both for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank
Before
you,
we wrap
guys.
up, I'd like to ask this one last question, which is, which brand do you admire the most? And when I say that, it's like in terms of like influencing even you as a leader
I can't wait to hear
and your
answer.
decisions. So
This is so hard. That's like picking a baby.
Yeah, I know.
it doesn't have to be your
Doesn't
favorite
have to be one of yours,
brand.
just like a brand you admire.
Yeah, something that's been influential in your decision making, or
Ty and I are like,
I know. That's really like.
how do you
They're in it, Chris. They're in it.
I know.
I won't say which brand I admire the most, but because it's just top of mind, we were just talking about it. What I find the e.l.f. acquisition of Rode really compelling
It
at
was
this moment in
compelling.
time, because, I think it was a company who's getting it right already, who went out and said, like, how do we disrupt ourselves and how do we look from at non-traditional innovation sources? And how do we not just bet on this person, but how do we bet on this audience that is another audience that is akin to ours, and we have to proactively outreach? So they didn't do it on the back foot. They did it after. I think they had experienced something crazy. I don't remember how many consecutive quarters of growth they've experienced. And Corey, their CMO, is brilliant. But the idea that they would, go out and proactively say, this means something for us. And I think, and it's a testament to Rhode, how fast that brand has grown by being hyper-specific, creating a lifestyle. And, while it's a celebrity-helmed brand, I think there's so many takeaways that like big behemoth, brand holding companies and, sort of like baby brands that are just starting can learn from both of those examples. So it's not the one, I won't say who I admire the most, but I found that partnership very admirable. So.
Okay.
I'm going to go even a different direction, and I will say not a brand that is a traditional consumer brand. I will pick an IP brand because we all also came from the entertainment world. I am absolutely obsessed with K-pop Demon Hunters.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Number one.
It is incredible. Like, my son can't stop singing the songs. It is the only thing that plays in the car. And the thing that's appealing about it is not only is the IP incredibly attractive and appealing to a multi-generational household, it also has so many legs for sequels, prequels, consumer products. You're talking about a very rich universe that has suddenly been created, exploded overnight, global, tapped into K-pop, tapped into music, tapped into pop culture, and has defined this next chapter for a young adult audience. Think of how many children watch that, and that has become a core memory. And for the rest of all of us parents, we will be buying those toys and products, right? So to me, I feel like if you can generate a brand or an IP that has that long-standing effect, that hits that many notes and that many genres, that's incredible, right? Like, if you think about it, think about that pitch. It's about like demon hunters who are K-pop bands saving the world, right?
I know.
If Ty and I were to go and pitch that today, we would be great, but like still.
But still, there'd be some
And
irony.
this will be left out.
right?
Yes.
But the fact that it landed and it worked, to me, I feel like that's what brands are supposed to do. They're supposed to affect you not just emotionally. There's a lasting impact, and you vote with it and you pay for it. Like, I know I'm going to buy a lot of that now. I already have those songs living in my head rent-free right now, right?
Absolutely.
So that, to me, is an incredible universe that just got created, hyper relevant, and all of us are in it. Like, that moment I said that, all of us knew exactly what that was. That is a powerful brand and IP.
I just showed my wife the trailer the other night because it was our first night in a long time to just sit down and watch something together. And I was like, I know, probably not tonight when you have a billion other things to finish, but check out this trailer. And the minute we got through it, she was just like, that's amazing. Like,
They did
my wife and I are like,
brilliant
okay,
job.
when are we going to watch this movie now?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really cool brand, and it has been crazy to see the zeitgeist and how fast it's gotten. One of my favorite musicians, I shouldn't say favorite, I really enjoy his music, so I don't want to like downplay it now that I've said it, but Baby No Money, his big thing on TikTok has been cosplaying. And so he started to cosplay. He did a gender bend cosplay for the Demon Hunter stuff. And yeah, it's crazy.
And tapping into
It's
all those
everywhere.
verticals and getting them when they're young.
Exactly.
Also brilliant.
You've
Old
cornered-
school Disney moves.
Exactly. And that's exactly it, right? The playbook could have been done before, but how they executed it was flawless. Like, if you look at the number of wigs that are being created, these different revenue streams and businesses popping off of it that aren't even wholly owned by Netflix, right? Like, I'm blown away. That's the kind of thing that all of us want to do. If we can build a brand like that, that'd be powerful. We should work on that.
Look.
There's an
Listen.
elf crossover there too somewhere.
K-pop Vampire Slayers coming next, guys. Thank you so much for being with us
Alrighty,
today.
thank you all so
having
much for
us.
coming
It's
on.
incredible.
Thank you.
Alrighty.